Hello, I am the Grubstlodger, and I'd like to talk to you about this work here. The 1719 work, Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe, often described as the father of English novels. In fact, this is often described as the first English novel, though I think that's more of a ceremonial title. Unlike a lot of 18th century works, it's had quite a few adaptations. Louis Brunel has done one. A whole bunch of people have done one. There's also this TV series. But we're not going into that. We're going into a more modern film. We're going to do the Robinson Crusoe with Pierce Brosnan in it. In fact, Pierce Brosnan was revealed to be Bond while he was filming this film. They wanted to do reshoots with him afterwards, and they offered him lots of money to do it, but he said he wouldn't, unless they bought him a Maserati car. So they did that, and he completed the film. However, with all the expense, including the expense of a highly expensive sports car, the film wasn't even properly released. I haven't really found out why. I've had a look. So I thought maybe the answer lies within the film itself. The film starts with a really seemingly pointless frame story with someone giving Robinson Crusoe's diary to Daniel Defoe. I'm going to talk a bit more about that at the end. But then we get into the story itself, and that's not originally how it began. And is he Scottish? Now, of course, Robinson Crusoe is from York. It's actually part of the full title of the book. It's one of those books that has the big, long, blurby titles, which in this copy is quite a long way through it. And it's the life and strange, surprising adventures of Robinson Crusoe of York, mariner, who lived 28 years all alone in an uninhabited island on the coast of America near the mouth of the great river of Orinoco, having been cast ashore by shipwreck wherein all the men perished but himself, with an account of how he was at last as strangely delivered by pirates written by himself. I know, it's, as I said in another video, these long titles were because they also served as the blurb. Now, as you can see by that, Robinson Crusoe is from York, and the book purports to be written by Robinson Crusoe. When it was first published, it was published as if by Robinson Crusoe. And so that also makes that frame story earlier seem a little bit peculiar. But I think I know why they've made him from Scotland. It's because the mariner who was marooned, not shipwrecked, called Andrew Selkirk, was from Scotland. And so there's more of a link to Andrew Selkirk rather than to Robinson Crusoe. And in fact, that comes in a bit later as well. So, okay, he's Scottish, I don't mind. However, Pierce Brosnan does one of those Scottish accents, which is Scottish enough to be Scottish, but not Scottish enough not to be distracting for the entire film.
We were friends once. Does not that count for anything?
Fair enough. Now, in the book, we begin with actually one of the more surprisingly interesting parts of Defoe here. Defoe's not very good at writing characters and people, but he starts with a really good character drama. Robinson Crusoe is desperate to go off to sea, he's desperate to see the world, he's desperate to have adventures. His father and his mother have settled him down for a very quiet, peaceful life of law, and it starts off with the argument between them, in which Robinson Crusoe actually just takes himself off, much to their disgust. And he regards a lot of his misfortunes along the way as being a curse on ignoring his parents' advice. In this, we have a duel over a woman, and because of the duel and because he kills his best friend, he has to hop it quick. And then there's the woman that he loves. And it's pretty obvious why they might do this. It's to give him more reason to want to get back. I know, being stranded on a desert island for 28 years, you probably want to get back anyway, but they felt the need to have this love pull him back. And it works in some ways. In fact, it makes the ending better, because the ending of the book of Robinson Crusoe, he gets back and he hasn't really got any roots there, so he just drifts off again. So in the film, he has roots, he comes back, he settles, that's good. But at the same time, it feels like a film contrivance, it's a little bit naff. Oh well, he's on the boat now. Cue the storm. Actually, uncue the storm. There's just one little thing I want to say. When they kiss, they really eat face. And there's some very bad foreshadowing.
In a year, I'll return. Then we shall be wed.
If it is 13 months, Robin, then shall I marry another?
See? So cue the storm.
Skip to the end.
When Robinson Crusoe lands on the island, the narration begins. In fact, as I realised that most of this film will have this narration over it.
A dread came over me.
Precisely. But
The captain's old dog, Skipper.
we get a cute dog. And so Robinson Crusoe builds his house. Now, in the book, this takes up a lot of space. In fact, describes his building his house 3 times at least, and he's constantly describing it afterwards. And then about that much is building his house. It's a big part of it. It's about a third of the novel, possibly more. And we find everything about how he builds his house. We find he builds his palisades made out of this plant, this tree that grows extra quickly, so it builds his firm fences around everything he does. We find his rock, and he caves into the rock with a wooden shovel he's built out of this very strong wood, and he makes that his storehouse, and then he makes a summer house, and he makes another hideaway, and he essentially has this whole complex of buildings he eventually builds himself. A film could do this all in a montage, and this film pretty much does. No problem with that.
The spirit of Scotland.
We then get this comedy bagpipe scene. To be fair, no rational creature likes the bagpipes. And so we get to one of the climactic scenes of the book. A footprint in the sand. Not only is this not very far through the film, in the book it is the last third of the book when he finds a footprint. But he reveals, in voiceover of course, that he's only been there for 2 years. So it's not only that the time feels shorter, it actually is shorter, which is a detriment, because one of the great things about the book is sometimes how boring it is. That it feels like this time stretched out on this island all alone, and this is just squished up in the film. He finds the footprint because they really want to get to the Friday stuff. That's what they're really after here. So, not long after the footprint, he hears whoops and wails, and he sees the cannibals. And there they are, killing people, eating people. Ugh. In the book, he decides not to kill the cannibals, because it's murder. And he has no quarrel with them. And he doesn't feel justified in killing them. I mean, at first he does. At first he really, really wants to, and he feels that it's the right thing to do. And then he thinks, well, no, God made these cannibals. And God has not stopped them being cannibals. And God has not taught them that cannibalism is the wrong way. Why do I have the right to do that? But in this film, he just goes for it. He starts killing cannibals. He rescues one. This one is Friday. Friday bows down.
Mr. Your humble servant.
But it's a ruse. Friday's not going to be anybody's slave. And they have a bit of a protracted fight. And the next 5-10 minutes of the film involves them coming together sort of as friends, a little bit unsure, then them fighting, them coming together, then them fighting. At one point, Robinson Crusoe chains Friday up with slave manacles he just happens to have for some reason, and then he unchains him, and there's this constant, mostly non-verbal sort of interplay between them to see who is the master, who is the servant, what kind of relationship they have. And this is actually where the film differs from the book in some ways, and also where the film is really interested in. This is the meat of the story for the filmmakers. It is that relationship between Crusoe and between Friday. We even learn Friday's real name later, rather than the name Friday, which is given to him by Crusoe. And so, in this, they can't. They don't just fall into a master-servant relationship. In fact, they split off for a bit and have sort of cold war around the island. There's just two of them, but they're at war. And as Crusoe says,
Little did this pagan know, but his adversary was once trained as a soldier. So he would be facing one skilled in strategy and the military arts.
so of course, key scene in the film is where Crusoe uses his pistol to shoot a bat. And then Friday uses his boomerang to kill a bat. And he picks him up and he shows them. See, they're both dead. There's an equal power balance. Now this scene in the book plays out very differently. It's actually a very little minor scene. It's where Crusoe shoots a hawk with his gun just to show Friday how powerful a gun is and to convince Friday to stop waving it around. And so, yeah, we have this whole thing of two different but equally important and valid cultures meeting together. And of course that's what the film does. This film's made in 1997. It can't have the same prejudices and ideas that a book from 1719 does, you know? I'm sure for a lot of people watching the film, the 1997 film will seem out of date to the 2019, so God knows what 1719 is going to do. There are people reading this book, many people do read it because it's often a set text for the early novel or the 18th century novel or the colonial novel, and they say they can't read it or that they hate Crusoe because he's an imperialist or because he is a slaver or because his ideas and attitudes of the world do not mesh up with them as a reader. I mean, I think that's a load of bollocks. I think that's rubbish. You can read something you disagree with. You can read this and go, I think Robinson Crusoe's thoughts about Friday and about slavery and about, you know, the white man's burden as it was later become to be known, you know, spreading civilization and Christianity as you know, Crusoe feels it should be done. Of course I think he's wrong. I mean, of course he's wrong. But that doesn't mean I can't read the book. And it doesn't mean I can't put myself into that character. I mean, one of the key skills in reading is empathy. Empathizing with different characters. I mean, what have I got down here? I've got a book about a mermaid. There aren't such things as mermaid. I've got to make that up. I've got to empathise. I've got to put myself into the character there. I've got... What else have I got here? Oh, I've got all sorts going on around here. I've got to pretend to be this person. I've got to empathise with this person. I might not even agree with them on everything. But that's part of reading. That's part of the joy of reading. That's part of the whole purpose of it. So if you can't put yourself into this man's head, when this writer has actually done a lot more work than he usually does to get you there, just give up reading, I think. But there you go. But if we're examining the issue of two cultures coming together, okay, differences. Okay, let's see that. So, in the film, it's always maintained that they're different cultures who are as valid as each other. So they have a very big argument about religion, in which Friday then declares,
I no like your God. I no like you.
And they split up again and become separate people. And Crusoe sort of muses on the fact that there are only two people on his island and they're torn apart by religion.
In my studies of history, I had chronicled the religious wars that have plagued mankind since the beginning of time. And how sad I thought that in this universe of two, religion had now put us at our own war.
In fact, this film's kind of set up like a love story. I mean, they meet in a sort of quirky way, one being eaten by cannibals. Then they get on very well, but then they have a little tiff, and then they get back together. And now it's the big third act breakup. and now they've got to go and do their own things, and Pierce Brosnan has to take his top off and walk around in the rain with slightly toned body, making a canoe, and then they've got to have a moving, heartfelt coming back together in the rain. Aww. Yeah, I never thought of it as a love story before. It's kind of sweet. And now it's not a love story. And now the canoe is gone and the cannibals are back and they've got to set up traps. It's time for some Home Alone. I'm not using the music. I got in trouble last time I used the music. And Robinson Crusoe now being Scottish, he puts on his Braveheart paint. There you go. He's looking great. He's playing his bagpipes again. And the traps work. There you go. There you go. There you go. More dead cannibals. We love dead cannibals, except for Friday, because we like him, so we don't want him to die. You know what? This isn't as progressive as it thinks it is, but still, fun action scene. Good, 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 good. But oh no, Robinson Crusoe's been shot. What are they going to do? Well, there's only one thing they can do. Friday has to take him back to his people. Unfortunately, he came across to the island as a sacrifice. His people regard him as dead. And if he turns up as a dead man. What's more, he turns up as a dead man with a white man. And they've met white men, and those white men sold them into slavery. So, not a great idea. But the love for the two men together. On they get on their boat, off they sail, off they go back to the village. And so here's the problem. You've got two people who are really not welcome in this place. And they're forced to have a duel. And guess what? Book ending. Started with a duel, ended with a duel. Even the voiceover says so.
Just as a duel had caused me to flee my native land, so too did a battle between friends bring about my return.
See? I hate that voiceover. Why is there so much voiceover in this film? And it's actually a very emotional duel. And this is so far away from the book now. In the book, they fought off some cannibals, not with a whole load of Home Alone traps, but you know there weren't that many cannibals. And a little bit of gunpowder goes a long way. And then there are these pirates that came up who are taking over the ship, they're mutinying. And so Crusoe and Friday and the pirates work together to suppress the mutineers, and then they all get on the boat, and then they all go back to Europe. And now the relationship between Friday and Crusoe is almost not important at all. Friday is just his manservant, and they go over some mountains, and there's some wolves, and you know what? The book has a really, really lame ending, and if it hadn't been so interesting up to there, I would have savaged this book like a herd of wolves. Really, that wolves bit is just awful. And yeah, no. In fact, I think the film improves on the work quite a long way here, because the notion that Friday is undead, that he can't go back, and that they do go back is really, really interesting. And because they have dealt with this friendship, because they have thought so much about how these two people become really intimate friends and not an uneven colonising relationship, they're now forced to fight each other. And actually it's really quite emotional, it's quite gripping, because neither of them wants to do it. They both have to, but neither of them wants to. And what's really strange is they really do go for it.
Come on. You friend. Alex!
Whitey to the rescue.
Come on! Over here! This way! Come on! Don't worry me, Hardy. These savages can't harm you now.
And this is where all of the discussion of slavery and colonising and all of the things that have happened up to here are really, really interesting and quite poignant, because Friday dies in this version. Friday dies because the white people have shot him. And in doing so, they have saved Robinson Crusoe. Robinson Crusoe is now saved. He goes back home. He goes to his wife. It's a happy ending. Except it's not a happy ending, because that really beautiful relationship, which was, I have to say, really well performed by the two actors, has ended, and has ended horribly and ironically, and it's a very bittersweet ending to this film. And then we have our Defoe wrap-up. And this is where the Defoe wrap-up is really pointless. Because, well, one, the original book was published as if by Robinson Crusoe. There is no Defoe for the first readers of this book. It's just the book of Robinson Crusoe that he wrote. And also, within the context of the film, if Robinson Crusoe's wrote the whole story, what does Defoe have to do? But yeah, that's pointless. Pointless. That's the end of the film.
I must write this.
Ultimately, I can't understand why the film never got released. It was well acted, it was well filmed. Okay, the Scottish accent was a bit dodgy, but it was a really entertaining film, and it asked the questions that people need to ask of Robinson Crusoe in a way that was very interesting, that had a good dynamic story and a really good central relationship, and the two actors worked very, very well together. And so I think this is a really good version of the story, as much as it's different. And the second half is very different. And I think people should read this and reflect. And I think people should watch the film and reflect. Next time, I'm going to be looking at another version of Robinson Crusoe. And this one's very, very different.
It's